Overwatch 2 is not a sequel. Instead, it's a new phase of an existing game that has been tarnished straight out of the gate by poor communication, confusing marketing, and the abhorrent workplace practices of both its developer and its publisher. But is it any good? Yes, it's exceptional, the best Overwatch has ever been, a sublime competitive shooter that finally has the opportunity to receive the player count it so rightly deserves thanks to its free-to-play business model. It's also incomplete, overly complicated in places, and a bit messy. Basically, Overwatch 2 is very difficult to talk about at the moment. I have a lot to say about it, but also surprisingly little. I like it a lot, but I have some concerns. Overwatch 2 is a competitive multiplayer shooter where players attempt to complete one or more objectives, such as capturing a fixed point or escorting a moving object to a goal. Its 35 playable characters are divided up into 3 classes: tank, damage, and support, with each having access to a number of unique abilities that can help their team succeed. Now, if you played the original game, this will no doubt all sound very familiar. However, there are a few notable differences between the two games. Teams are now made up of 5 players rather than 6. The majority of heroes have also had their abilities adjusted, mainly to remove any skills that allow you to place shields or inflict stun on an enemy. The result is a faster game that packs a bit more bite. Overwatch 2 encourages players to be more aggressive, the slightly reduced player count forcing you to work as a team to break through enemy defenses and achieve your goals more so than in the original game. That reduction in team sizes is a small change, but in practice it does make the game feel quite different to its predecessor. For starters, teams now only have 1 tank instead of 2, which provides players with a natural focal point during matches. Tanks are stronger, have more health, and can resist knockback, making them beasts that turn the tide of battle with ease, but only if their team pulls together to give them the support they need. Unless you were playing with friends or competitively, the original game could feel quite aimless. Teammates would dash from the spawn point back into the action regardless of whether or not the rest of their squad was dead, preferring to lone wolf a match rather than work together with strangers. Now, this still happens in Overwatch 2, don't get me wrong, but the refreshed team dynamic teaches players quickly that abandoning your tank or failing to protect your support will result in a quick and frustrating death. Regardless of game mode, the tank is your priority, the glue that holds your team together and will carry you to victory. I find that teams will hold back until the tank is ready to go, pulling together in a way that feels more natural and less forced. It's all still chaotic nonsense, of course. Ultimates are unleashed with less frequency than before due to the smaller team sizes, but it's easy to get vaporized by a fatal explosion of colour and sound at least once a match. Matches play out largely the same, too, with opposing teams slamming into each other repeatedly before breaking through the other team's defences, establishing dominance before the other team inevitably does the same back. Based on 15 hours with the game, I will say that things do feel a little more balanced this time around. Previously, you'd know if your team was destined to be melted by a superior group of players within the first few moments of a match, but teams seem able to pull back easier than before. I imagine it's a combination of the reworked heroes and the reduced team sizes, but either way, I'd say the game is more palatable here than it's ever been before. But saying that, Overwatch's biggest problem still remains. While nothing feels better than winning a game of Overwatch, your entire team coalescing into a force of destruction, a barrage of bullets, magic, and goo that melts the enemy team like a molten hot samurai sword through a pack of lukewarm Lurpak, losing in Overwatch makes me feel detached from reality, small and insignificant, an ant desperately attempting to return home as the focused beam of a child's magnifying glass overwhelms my fragile frame. This pendulum swing of emotion is neither enjoyable nor healthy. Playing Overwatch 2 is still an exercise in agony, and after 6 years, I can't decide if I even like it or not. I both love and hate it, and the conflict between those two extreme opinions is probably why I chose to play Fortnite instead. Overwatch 2 takes an emotional toll. It's similar to the original game then, for better or worse. For the record, I am having enormous fun revisiting this world and its characters, re-experiencing the tension, the frustration, and the joy that is so uniquely Overwatch. But it's hard not to wonder, would I have felt like this if I had just returned to the original game? Other than the new team sizes and some hero reworks, what actually is new here? Well, that's the question right now, isn't it? And the answer is sort of a half-hearted shrug. The biggest addition comes in the form of 3 new heroes. Junker Queen is a shotgun-wielding tank that hoys a knife that fizzles with electricity and can be recalled like Thor's hammer. Sojourn is a DPS hero that can launch herself into the air before chewing through enemies with a machine gun. And finally there's Kiriko, a healer that soothes the wounds of her teammates with floating bits of paper and can summon a fox to increase her teammates' attack speed. All 3 heroes are impeccably designed, well polished, and a blast to play. They're potentially 3 of the best heroes Blizzard has ever created, especially Kiriko, whose ability to both heal and cause damage makes her a powerful ally on the battlefield. They feel purpose-built for the game's fresh team dynamics, each comfortably fitting into their roles, synergizing with their teammates to help carry them to victory. Outside of heroes, there are 6 new maps, all of which are fine, as well as a new mode called Push. Now, in the beta, I found Push to be quite dry. The constant tug-of-war that occurred as both teams attempted to escort a robot to the other base, more tedious than fun. In the final release, however, it's revealed itself to be a worthy addition to the game's existing roster of modes. Overwatch has always been at its best when both teams replace the other as the dominant force, each one overcoming the other until one manages to squeeze in a last-second victory. For what it's worth, Push, with its robot that stomps back and forth through the map, facilitates this drama by design, and is wonderful as a result. And that's it? Yeah, that's it. 3 new heroes, 6 new maps, and 1 new game mode, with more promised for future updates in line with the game's new seasonal approach to content delivery. And this brings us nicely to Overwatch 2's free-to-play business model, which is perhaps the one element that has caused the most grief among its community. So yes, Overwatch 2 is now free, which according to the long queues I've been stuck in since launch, has been, anecdotally at least, a positive move in regard to the game's player count. It does, however, mean that the game is jammed up with all of the sticky monetization practices you'd expect from such a change. A battle pass that is fine, skins and other cosmetics that range from okay to boring, a shop that allows you to purchase cosmetics with Overwatch coins, a currency that can be bought with real-world money or earned in-game by completing weekly challenges. Now, personally, I find it hard to criticize this new model of unlocking content. Let's not forget that Overwatch was the game that defined the template for paid loot boxes, after all, gating the majority of its content behind them. Yeah, battle passes and in-game stores aren't great, but at least you know what it is you're getting this time around, right? I have no issues with battle passes other than their time-limited nature, which personally I find overwhelming, but as I say, at least they aren't loot boxes. This just feels like a net positive for me, personally. The only concern is how effective this method is going to be when it comes to keeping players engaged. Will fresh seasons and content bring players back every 9 weeks? It works for Fortnite and Warzone, so the theory does check out, but does Overwatch 2 carry the same appeal? It's a question I've been thinking about constantly since I started playing Overwatch 2. The original game launched at such an opportune time. In 2016, the multiplayer market was oversaturated with grey military shooters that were becoming increasingly focused on emulating realistic warfare. In comparison, Overwatch, a bright and cheery hero shooter that encouraged team play, felt like a breath of fresh air. Its biggest appeal was that it was different. A new take in a market that was feeling increasingly stagnant. It's no wonder it became an overnight sensation. But in 2022, that market is completely different. Battle Royales have retained their popularity for the best part of half a decade, and competitive multiplayer shooters are hardly a rarity either, with the likes of Valorant singing quite loudly from Overwatch's hymn sheet. Also, these things are frequently handed out for free, and have become entrenched in people's daily routines simply because they're so widely available and updated frequently enough to remain interesting. I think it's fair to say that if Overwatch 2 had launched this week as a paid product, in its current form, it would have been dead on arrival. But even as a free-to-play game, I'm concerned that not enough is different for it to stand out among the likes of Fortnite, Fall Guys, Warzone, or Valorant. Which brings me back to my original point. Overwatch 2 is not a sequel, it's an update, and not a particularly substantial one at that. That 2 at the end of its name hands out a lot of checks the game is as yet unable to cash, setting an expectation that players are going to be treated to a vastly enhanced experience rather than the reality, which is just more of the same. When Team Fortress 2 went free to play, Valve clearly communicated that this was the same game it's always been, only now the barrier to entry has been removed. It was clear to everyone that the change in that process was that the game was now free to play. Nothing more, nothing less. Imagine, during that process, Valve had decided to rename the game Team Fortress 3. We're seeing the results of that peculiar, theoretical decision right now, in real time, alongside the launch of Overwatch 2. It's not all doom and gloom though. As it stands right now, Overwatch 2 is fantastic, a thrilling multiplayer FPS that still feels completely unique among its competitors. Let's not forget that this is only half of what the game will one day become, with Overwatch 2's highly anticipated PvE mode set to launch at some point in the future. If this is the basis on which that game is being built, it's easy to imagine that in a year's time, Overwatch 2 may live up to its potential as a true sequel to the original game. But seeing as that's purely a speculative position at this point, let me leave you with this final thought on the current state of Overwatch 2. All characters in Overwatch 2 have received new default skins that visualize the passage of time that's occurred between the two games. Some are more obvious redesigns, whereas others are so similar, it's hard to notice the differences. You could spend a lot of time analyzing these minor details, focusing in on these minute additions, and obsessing over how little has changed between the two. Or you could pull that camera back a little, focus on the whole, and admire them for what they are, rather than what you expected them to be. Thank you so much for watching this video. Are you playing Overwatch 2? Let me know in the comments below. For all your PC gaming needs, make sure to check out rockpapershotgun.com, and I will see you very soon.